Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater. Today we're checking out the return of a legendary compressor limiter. Let's get started. The Fairchild 660 and 670 tube compressor limiters are legendary pieces of gear. They were created decades ago, and since then they've become very rare. They're very difficult to service. They've become extremely expensive. And there have been some recreations on the market. There are some plug-in recreations. But now Heritage Audio has brought us the Fairchild 660 and the Fairchild 670. The original Fairchild 660 and 670 were created in the late 1950s. There were two people who were really responsible for that. The first was Rain Narma, and he was an inventor and an engineer, and he came up with a concept for these amazing compressor limiters. But the man behind the Fairchild company, actually a serial entrepreneur behind 70 different companies, was Sherman Fairchild, who was a son of a congressman and one of the co-founders of IBM. Sherman Fairchild was into all sorts of different things: photography, aerial photography, and pro audio. And that's the connection that led to the Fairchild 660 and 670 back in the late 50s. Now, the number of these that were produced is disputed a bit. Some people say there were 500, some as many as 1,000, but very few were created, and even fewer survived to where they're operational today. The original Fairchild 660 and 670 are sort of holy grails of pro audio. They were originally designed for mixing and mastering back in the mono era with the 660. The 670, a stereo unit, came out later when stereo audio became more prominent. But you'll see that reflected when we look at some of the controls that are labeled lat and vert, lateral and vertical, and those refer to the depth and the width of vinyl grooves. The original vintage units can sell for as much as $40,000, and one of the problems with them is even if you can afford that price, they're very difficult and expensive to maintain for a couple of reasons. One, they have a ton of tubes in them, as well as a ton of transformers, and they also use a very rare tube, a 6386. It's not very common today, difficult to track down. The design of the original 660 and the 670 is a very minimal design. Basically, there's an input transformer, there's a Class A amplifier that through Verumu processing does the gain control or the level control, and then there's an output transformer. Now, when Heritage Audio set out to recreate this with the Fairchild 660 and the Fairchild 670, they took very much the same approach. These are faithful to the original with a few modern enhancements. Once again, we have a mono unit and we have a stereo unit. Tons of tubes, 11 up here, 22 down here. We've got 5 transformers up here, 9 transformers down here. So these are complete beasts, but they're much more affordable than the originals and much easier to maintain because they're using 12AX7 vacuum tubes. As with the originals, we have a completely tube-based signal path, and in fact that signal path is still very minimal. It's really just used for the Verumu compression processing. The rest of the tubes are actually control tubes for managing how that processing works. We have AMI transformers on the inputs, and we have Cinemag transformers on the outputs, and that's it. The Fairchilds, like the original Fairchilds, operate a bit differently than other compressors you may be familiar with. We don't have the familiar ratio control. We don't have separate attack and release controls. So let's take a little closer look at the controls that are available on these processors. Beginning here at my upper left, we have the metering control. Now this can be set to 0, which displays the audio levels, or to balance when you're resetting the balance for the tubes if you should replace the tubes in the back. We've got an input level gain control, and actually that's an attenuator that drops the signal by up to 20 dB as you turn it. We have the AC threshold, and this would be the audio signal threshold as you'd be familiar with other compressors. But the interesting control here is the DC threshold. This DC threshold is sort of similar to a knee and a ratio control combined into one. So as we turn it counterclockwise, we get more into limiting. We've got a hard knee and we've got a higher ratio. As we turn it up, we get to a medium knee and a medium ratio, medium knee and a soft ratio. And down here, we've got a soft knee with a medium ratio. So you adjust this continuously to set the response of the compressor where you want it to be. It's not exactly a ratio and a knee control, it's what they call a progressive ratio control, but the result is basically the same. We've got hard limiting down here and softer compression as you turn that up. The other control is the time constant control. Now this combines attack and release into 6 different preset settings. The original Fairchilds had very fast attack times. They were used for broadcast and for mastering, and so they wanted to catch all those peaks immediately. So if we turn over to setting 1, we've got a fast attack time and a fairly fast release time of 0.2 milliseconds on the attack and 0.3 seconds on the release. If we start stepping up, when we get to setting number 4, we've got a 0.4 millisecond attack time and a 5-second release time. Now the final two settings, 5 and 6, are more adaptive. At setting 5, we've got a 0.2 millisecond attack time. We've got a 2-second release time for a single peak and a 10-second release time if we have multiple peaks in a row. At setting 6, we've got a fast attack time, 0.2 milliseconds, and we've got 3 different adaptive release times. We've got 0.3 seconds on a single peak, 10 seconds on multiple peaks, and 25 seconds on a sustained high-level signal. Another feature on the Herchild, both 660 and the 670, is the sidechain. Now the sidechain is a feedback design. It comes after the compression circuit, and we've got a very powerful sidechain filter that we can assign to this. It can be set to off, 50 Hertz, 100 Hertz, 200 Hertz, and 350 Hertz. And that sidechain filter makes the compression less sensitive to low frequencies. So this allows you to keep a big dynamic fat bottom end in your sound while still controlling the overall dynamics of the signal. So that's all the controls that you would find on the 660. On the 670, because we have a 2-channel stereo unit, we've got one extra control, and that's the AGC control. And this sets how the 2 different channels are linked or not linked together. We have 4 settings here. The first setting is IND, independent, individual, and that would be basically where we have a dual mono compressor here. Each channel is operating completely separately with its own set of controls. When we go to link, this is for stereo operation. Everything is set by the left channel controls at the top, and the signals are averaged to give you the compression threshold. The last 2 settings are sort of legacy settings that date back to when they were mastering for vinyl for lacquer cutting. That's lat-vert and lat-vert link, and we can sort of think of those as mid-side in more modern terms. So lateral would be the width of the groove or the outside. Vert would be the middle or the depth of the groove. Now when we're in lat-vert setting, those 2 are independent with their own controls. When we set them to link, again, we've got these stereo linked in this case, or 2-channel linked actually it would be, with mid-side controlled by the left controls. This gives you a lot of possibilities for processing mono, 2-channel, and stereo signals, whether you're tracking, mixing, or mastering. There are a lot of nice touches with the Herchilds. We've got gold-plated XLR connectors on the back panel. On the back, you can see all those tubes, which makes them very easy to access when you need to replace them. And again, it's very easy to balance them using the meter on the front panel. One thing to keep in mind with a Fairchild-style compressor like this, the Herchild, is that it's not designed to be a heavy-handed, crush-it, really audible, colored-sounding compressor limiter. The recording style of the day was to go for natural-sounding recordings with transparent dynamics. And that's why these were so valuable for mastering and for mixing. But they do still give you a nice, big tone, especially when you use that sidechain filter. So let's listen to a few different examples. I've got a vocal here, I've got a bass guitar here, and I've got a drum mix. So let's begin by listening to the dry vocal.
Will it throw caution to the wind? Embrace a deadly sin. Oh, now we really know how far love will go.
Now here's the same track processed with sort of a medium ratio, medium knee, and I've got the sidechain filter off.
Will it throw caution to the wind? Embrace a deadly sin. Oh, now we really know how far love will go.
Now I'll turn that sidechain filter up to 350 Hertz, so we'll let more of the bass frequencies come through.
Will it throw caution to the wind? Embrace a deadly sin. Oh, now we really know how far love will go.
Now let's listen to the vocal, and I'll switch back and forth between dry and processed. I'll tell you when I'm switching. I'm going to leave the sidechain set to 350 Hertz. So we'll begin with dry.
Will it throw caution to the wind?
Compressed.
Embrace a deadly sin.
Dry.
Oh, now we really know.
Compressed. Dry.
How far love will go.
So you can hear it makes a dramatic change to the signal. It just makes it bigger, it makes it warmer, makes it richer, but it has a nice smooth top end to it as well. Now let's listen to a bass guitar. Once again, we'll begin with the sidechain turned off, and we'll begin with the dry signal. And here's the bass compressed with no sidechain. Now I'll move the sidechain up to 200 Hertz to make the compressor less sensitive to low frequencies. For comparison, here's the sidechain set back to off again. And sidechain at 200. Once again, a big difference there in the amount of bottom end that's getting through and how big the sound is. We'll finish up by listening to some drum tracks. Here's our dry drums. With the sidechain off. Back to dry. And with the sidechain at 350. Dry. $670. Dry. Compressed. As you can hear, the Fairchild 670 makes a big difference in the tonality of whatever you're running through. It just seems to smooth things out, make it sound bigger, make it sound wider, adds that solid bottom end depending on how you set up that sidechain, and you have all the possibilities for processing mid-side as well as stereo linked. Now when we look at the 660, it's exactly the same compressor, it's just a mono unit. So whether you're working on individual sources or you're working in mono for that matter, or you want to process stereo tracks as well as mono tracks, you've got two amazing choices for legendary compressor limiters to add to your gear arsenal. Thanks for joining me today. I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Click here for more videos like this, or start at sweetwater.com for all your music instrument and pro audio needs.